Is it the end of a preaching era? Today, information, content, and access to the most amazing and best communicators across the globe can be accessed at our fingertips. But what's less accessible? Genuine friendship, meaningful relationships, and a sense of community in the very places that we live. Is it possible that the emphasis is shifting from, hey, come and listen to this sermon, to let us help you find a community that is for you, happening right before our eyes? I mean, it's happening online. Information overload is real. People don't necessarily want more content from the people that they follow. People want access and to grow in a group of like-minded people. And I'm asking, could it be that this transformation is also needed within our churches? Not to say that preaching should or will ever go away. I don't think it should. But perhaps maybe how we emphasize preaching and the things that we consider important do need an adjustment. Try to go back to like 2014, 2015. Do you remember if you asked people how they were doing, what they would typically say? Go ahead, try to remember. Most of the time, people would say that they were busy. And it's interesting because there was something else that kind of coincided with this busyness that we were experiencing. And in 2015, the loneliness epidemic began to surface. And this surfacing of loneliness only confirms that people want and need connection, and how much more so today. If the emphasis today is, hey, come and listen to this preaching, and not on, hey, we can help you find a group of support and community, churches could miss a huge opportunity. And don't get me wrong, I love preaching. I love listening to preaching, and I love getting opportunities to teach and preach. I think it's valuable. But we can access the world's best communicators across YouTube, across social platforms, across podcasts, at any moment, at any time in the day. I mean, it makes me wonder, is the preacher or the preaching the draw to church anymore? I'm not so sure, because what people are in desperate need of right now has shifted compared to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. What got me thinking was I was recently listening to Pat Flynn share some of his observations on how and why info marketing no longer is working. And he said something that I think has a lot of crossover application. Selling information doesn't work anymore. It really made me think that this whole information explosion doesn't just apply to marketing and media. I started considering how this information overload is impacting our spiritual communities and what it could mean for the church. In the US, as I mentioned, we live in a society that has increasingly become more busy and more lonely. And just a few short years ago, this busyness was worn as if it was like a badge of honor. It was kind of like if we weren't rushing, or our schedules weren't full, or we weren't hurried to the next thing, then it was almost like we carried this sense of embarrassment or shame along with it. But it's interesting because as this busyness began to rise, so did loneliness. In 2013, Barna put out a report that stated, while loneliness among Americans has risen, the desire to find one's place among a few good friends has likewise increased. I mean, consider this too. In 2023, the US Surgeon General released a report on the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, stating that social networks are getting smaller and levels of social participation are declining, distinct from whether individuals report that they are lonely. So, as we feel busy and lonely, and the increase of information overload has exploded, it's only pushed further for what we really truly want and need. Hey, before we move on, if you're wrestling with things like discerning your unique gifting and calling, or you desire to be a better leader, but you're not sure what to do next, or you're navigating a difficult season and it's particularly challenging, I invite you to join me and others inside of a community that I host where we help pastors and faith-based leaders get out of ruts by understanding their unique gifting and calling. If this is of interest to you and to learn more about it, write the word community in the comments so that I can get the right information to you. So if we live in a culture that is busy and lonely, and we have access to more information than ever before, what do we do about it? You know, the Bible uses words like family and body to describe what our relationship should be like and why we should be connected. There's absolutely no doubt that God puts emphasis on relationship. And for a moment, I want to look at several passages throughout the book of Acts that I think indicate the value and the importance of relationship as we live out our faith. In Acts chapter 2, verse 1, notice the words, they were all together. In Acts 2, verse 42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. In Acts 3, verse 1, one day, Peter and John were going up to the temple. In Acts 5, verse 42, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. In Acts 12, verse 12, when this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, and also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. In Acts 16, verse 6, Paul and his companions traveled throughout the region. In Acts 20, verse 7, we came together to break bread. In Acts 28, verse 14, there we found some brothers and sisters who invited us to spend a week with them. The importance of emphasizing relationships is all throughout the entire book of Acts. And this is not to say that there is not value in gathering the large body together. I don't think that should ever go away either. However, what we emphasize and what we put value on may need to change. More than likely, it's not more sermons that people are needing or are hungry for. The observations that Pat Flynn shared about what's happening online, I believe are true for the church too. People are craving places and opportunities to live out their faith in meaningful, actionable ways alongside others who share their same beliefs and values. I think this shift challenges us to rethink how we engage our congregations and those that are outside of it. It used to be so much easier to draw people with preaching. You know, hey, come hear this famous speaker, or come hear this preacher. But you can probably find them online and listen to so much of their content that you get tired of it by the time the weekend gets here. Sermons still need to be preached. Large gatherings still need to happen. But the emphasis on these things probably needs to shift. You know, I came up in a time where Sundays were game time. You know, it was the Super Bowl for pastors. Everything was about Sunday. And I think this is shifting towards a focus on creating spaces and opportunities for people to collectively share, discuss, and gather in smaller settings without the expert, without the pastor being the one that's front and center, dispersing and empowering the body to lead in new and different ways. So what does this mean for you? Addressing this may simply start with how you think about church and what you emphasize or prioritize as most important. Is gathering people in large groups or small groups more important? Is listening to one person preach or empowering many to teach more important? Is using the internet to disperse content or to create connections more important? Is sharing information or implementation more important? Some of these questions are not easy and may require both and scenarios, and that's okay. If churches are willing to ask the right questions, they can more easily identify their strengths and weaknesses, reconcile extremes, and prioritize their goals to create a more balanced approach. Hey, what do you think about these ideas? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, then this next one may help you too.